Hey everyone, welcome back. We're about to jump into a deep dive. And, you know, something as simple as school lunches can actually get pretty complicated.
Yeah, it can get surprisingly complex.
Right. Like when you think about it, we're talking about feeding kids, right? Sounds pretty straightforward.
Well, you'd think so.
Yeah, but when you bring politics into the mix, things can get pretty interesting, to say the least.
Absolutely.
So that's exactly what we're going to be looking at today, the politics of school lunches.
Yeah.
Specifically, we're going to be digging into Michelle Obama's Healthy Hunger-Free Kids Act. That was back in 2010.
Mm-hmm.
And for this deep dive, we're going to be looking at a news commentary clip that's, well, let's just say it's pretty opinionated,
Yeah.
but that's what makes it fun, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So our mission today is to unpack all the claims and the different perspectives surrounding this act. Because, believe it or not, school lunches have become a bit of a battleground.
Yeah, they really have.
So let's start with the basics. What exactly did this Healthy Hunger-Free Kids Act aim to do?
Well, basically, it was all about making school meals healthier.
Okay, makes sense.
So they wanted to increase the amount of fruits and vegetables in school lunches.
Gotcha.
They pushed for more whole grains, less sodium, and tried to cut down on those unhealthy fats that everyone's always talking about.
Yeah, so healthier options all around.
It's sad.
Now, on the surface, that sounds like a pretty good idea, right? I mean, who wouldn't want kids eating healthier?
Yeah, it seems pretty reasonable.
But our source, they're not exactly thrilled about it. In fact, they go so far as to call the act Orwellian.
Hmm. Interesting.
That's a pretty loaded term, right?
It is.
So why do you think they would use such a strong word like that?
Well, you have to think about what Orwellian refers to. It brings up George Orwell's novel 1984, which is all about this oppressive government controlling every single aspect of people's
Oh,
lives.
yeah, I remember reading that in high school.
Right, so by using the term Orwellian, the source is basically saying that the government overstepped its boundaries with this act. It's like they're suggesting that the government is trying to dictate what kids eat, almost like in an authoritarian way.
Wow, that's a pretty serious accusation.
Yeah, it's definitely a strong statement.
And it doesn't stop there. The source also talks about inedible food and student revolts,
Yeah.
like there was total chaos in the cafeteria.
Oh, wow.
They even quote a House Freedom Caucus report that called the regulations burdensome and unworkable for schools.
So what were their main arguments against the act?
Well, the Freedom Caucus argued that the regulations were way too expensive and complicated for schools to actually implement effectively.
Okay, so logistical issues.
Yeah, exactly. They also claimed that it led to more food waste and that it didn't actually improve the health of the students.
Interesting. So they weren't necessarily against healthier meals, but more about the approach.
Right, and they really pushed for more local control over school meal programs instead of having this top-down federal mandate.
Makes sense giving more power to individual schools and districts.
Yeah, so it's clear that this act wasn't just about nutrition. It really sparked a whole debate about the role of government and how much control they should have.
Right, it became a much bigger issue.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, there's another point the source brings up. They talk about a 2012 USDA addendum to make it mandatory for schools to include a fruit or vegetable with every single lunch.
Okay, so every kid had to have at least one serving of produce.
Yep. Sounds reasonable on the surface, right?
Yeah.
You want kids to eat their fruits and veggies.
Sure.
But here's the thing. The source claims that this actually backfired.
How so?
They say that because of this rule, kids ended up eating less produce overall and wasting more food.
Now that's interesting.
Yeah, how does that even happen? You make it mandatory and they end up eating less.
Well, I think that's where you see those unintended consequences come into play. You have to remember, we're talking about kids here.
Right.
Imagine being told you have to take an apple or some carrots even if you don't want them. What are you going to do?
Probably toss it in the trash.
Exactly. Some studies actually suggested that forcing fruits and vegetables on kids without really addressing the underlying issue, which is making them appealing to kids, could lead to more waste and less consumption.
Yeah, if they're not going to eat it, it's just going to end up in the garbage.
Right. It's not really solving the problem.
So it seems like it was a well-intentioned idea that maybe wasn't executed in the best way.
Yeah, sometimes those things happen.
Now, our source also mentions Representative Mark Meadows, a Republican who tried to roll back some parts of this act during the beginning of Trump's presidency.
Okay.
So what was the political climate like back then when it came to school lunches?
Well, during the Trump administration, there was definitely a big push from certain Republican lawmakers to deregulate school meal programs.
Oh, so kind of going back to what the Freedom Caucus was saying.
Yeah, exactly. They argued that the Obama-era regulations were just too much of a burden and that they weren't really working.
So we see this constant back and forth, this tug of war between promoting healthy eating and concerns about the government overstepping its boundaries.
Yeah, it's a complex issue with a lot of different perspectives.
It's definitely not as simple as just deciding what goes on a lunch tray.
Definitely not.
And it really raises an important question for everyone listening. Even with the best intentions, how much should the government actually be involved in shaping what kids eat, especially when it comes to school lunches?
Absolutely. That's a big question, and I think this deep dive really highlights the complexities of trying to balance health goals with what students actually like and want to eat.
Right. You also have to consider the logistical challenges that schools face and the overall role of the government in these kinds of situations.
Exactly. Should school lunch programs focus solely on providing the most nutritious food possible, even if it means that some kids might not enjoy their meals or that there's going to be a lot of waste?
Or is there a way to find that balance between healthy eating and making sure the kids are actually happy with what they're getting?
It's a tough question.
Yeah, it really is food for thought, right?
Mm.
And this whole conversation about school lunches leads to a bigger point. How often do political agendas influence issues that seem pretty straightforward?
It happens all the time.
Yeah, even something as basic as school lunches can become this battleground of different ideologies and opinions.
Right.
It's a reminder to always look beyond the surface and consider the different perspectives at play.
Absolutely. Even in your own community, there might be these kinds of debates happening.
And it's up to us to stay informed and engage in these conversations thoughtfully.
That's what it's all about.
So keep those questions in mind as you go about your day.
Yeah, think about it.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, and we'll catch you next time.
See ya!